the last big devastating breakup that I had a few years ago, it's so funny because, when I look back through my journals of that time, of course, there are so many questions I wanted to ask him, and I really struggled with, should I keep trying to talk to him? Should I keep trying to sit down with him and have conversations? And that I realized if I sit down with him and have another conversation, unless his answer was I was totally stupid and wrong and you were right and I want to fix things, there's literally nothing he can say. There's no answer that he can give that will give me what I'm actually seeking, which is just to feel better about this and to find a way to move on. So for me, that's how I came to the conclusion, no, I should not reach out to this person and keep trying to talk, because I think that I want to ask a bunch of questions, but I really don't actually want to, or actually want to get those answers.
Welcome to the Multiamory podcast. I'm Jase.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Dedeker.
We believe in looking to the future of relationships, not maintaining the status quo of the past.
Whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, swinging, casually dating, or if you just do relationships differently, we see you, and we're here for you.
On this episode of the Multiamory podcast, we're tackling a universal experience, wanting to feel better after a relationship ends. But here's the problem. Most of us are actually seeking the wrong kind of closure, which can keep us stuck in pain longer than necessary. Today, we'll break down the critical difference between searching for answers and finding true acceptance, explore the fascinating science behind our need for closure, and give you practical tools to identify which type of closure you actually need in this moment. Whether you're processing a recent breakup or trying to move forward from an old wound, this episode will help you understand why your usual approach might not be working and what to do instead. If you're interested in learning about our fundamental communication tools that we reference on this show, you can check out our book, Multiamory: Essential Tools for Modern Relationships, which covers some of our most used communication tools for all types of relationships. You can find links to buy it in written form, as well as our new audiobook format read by our own Emily, and you can check all of that out at multiamory.com/book.
Let me tell you a tale of two cities. One city is called Closure, and the other city, also called Closure. And you're at a fork in the road. You know that you need to get closure, but you're not sure which city of closure is the right city of closure for
This
you.
would be really confusing on maps and everything.
I know.
Airbnbs.
Do I need to write to my city council person to tell them this road sign's confusing because both directions say the same thing? What's going on?
That's why it's confusing. It's so
confusing.
confusing. Yeah. So the term itself, closure, can mean many different things. There are many different people living within these two cities of closure. And the reason why I use this very silly two cities image is because I find it helpful to think of there being two distinct types of closure that we seek, particularly when it comes to the end of a relationship. So I think of closure type 1 being the need for answers and understanding. And then I think of closure type 2 as the need for processing and acceptance. So for instance, this need for answers and understanding, it's, our relationship ends and you're really trying to put the puzzle pieces together. You're asking yourself, why did this happen? How did we get here? And maybe more importantly, your brain is trying to figure out, how do I prevent this from happening again? If I can get answers and if I can understand all the dominoes that led me to this point, maybe I can help prevent myself from making these same mistakes again or having to go through this particular pain again. And I want to set that up in contrast to closure type 2, city 2, part 2.
Okay.
Which is our need for processing and acceptance. So this looks like seeking a felt sense of ease or lightness, seeking a way out of the pain and the sadness, wanting to find our ability to move on and focus on other things, to feel healed, to feel whole again, or to find a restored sense of normalcy after the chaos of a relationship falling apart or heartbreak. Does that seem like that tracks this dual nature of closure? This tale of two cities that I have told you.
I think yes. And also, I've heard it said that in certain relationships, when maybe somebody was at fault and you're very angry about a certain thing and you end a relationship due to that anger or due to that thing that happened where somebody was at fault, to me, I would put that under type 2, like this processing and acceptance and moving on and being like, okay, I'm moving out of here. Whereas the need for answers and understanding might come when there wasn't necessarily anything that anyone did wrong, but the relationship ends due to maybe incompatibilities or somebody's just like, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling it anymore. And it ends up being this sort of deep sadness as opposed to anger. And that often can be really difficult to figure out, wait, why did this happen? I need more answers, more understanding to get why this thing occurred that feels so challenging and hurtful and harmful. Whereas the other thing, it's like, I just got to move past it. I got to move past my anger, move past like the challenging thing that happened and accept it and get out of there, move on.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. So it sounds like what you're saying is if you're in a situation where already out the gate, it's clear to you this person was an asshole. You know, they cheated on me, they lied to me, they betrayed me in some way. And so that's settled for you. Now it's just, how do I heal? I know that they're the bad guy, and now I just need to find a way to move on. Versus where maybe it's a little bit more ambiguous or a little more messy, then you think that triggers more of the, oh my God, I need to sift through this and find answers.
Totally. That's how I would view it.
I would just want to complicate it more.
Of course.
Yes, of course you do.
To find the situations where it's like, oh, well, I want closure from this because they were the asshole, right? Right? No, it was them, right? Right? We're all certain about this, right? Kind of that lingering doubt of like, what part did I play in this? What do I need to learn? Or no, or was it just them? Like I need some like outside referee to clearly state this is exactly what happened and here's who was wrong at different points. Like I think sometimes it can go in that direction too.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So ultimately, I'm not trying to pit these two types of closure against each other. I don't think that one is inherently better than the other. And I think depending on the situation, most of us seek both of these, right? However, what I think I sometimes see is that often people will behave as though they're seeking one type when really they want a different type. So for instance, I think I will see people behave in ways as though they're just seeking answers. They're just trying to understand when really what they're seeking is, I want to find a way to move past this and process this and accept this and feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like thinking that getting those answers is the thing they need in order to move on and let it go.
Right. So for instance, like, can you think of scenarios where someone behaves as though they're seeking just answers and understanding, but really what they're wanting is processing and acceptance?
I think, for instance, when somebody keeps asking their ex for like another conversation or another sit down, another, last discussion together to try to understand why things ended, that person might feel like they're really seeking answers and understanding, but I feel like often that's actually just emotional comfort and the comfort of being around this person again and trying to find something of what the two of you used to have together. Maybe that would make like this scenario a little bit less painful, even though you're saying you just want to figure out like what went wrong. Let's process this. Let's go through this together. But in reality, you want that comfort and that support and the just recognition from another person that you are in a lot of pain.
Yeah, I feel like another subtle variation on that is saying, I want to really understand. I want more closure, when it actually might still be, I want to keep negotiating to keep this relationship. It's sort of a similar thing, right? Where it's this inability to let it go, whether that's just wanting to talk again or thinking that you can somehow save it at this point. But yeah, it's like disguising it as, I just want clarity. I just want to understand, when maybe really there's something else underneath of like, I want to try to keep it going or
Yeah.
something like that, right? Because they're not able to have that letting go.
Yeah, the last like big devastating breakup that I had a few years ago, it's so funny because, when I look back through my journals of that time, of course, there are so many questions I wanted to ask him, and I really struggled with, should I keep trying to talk to him? Should I keep trying to sit down with him and have conversations? And that I realized if I sit down with him and have another conversation, unless his answer was like, I was totally stupid and wrong and you were right and I want to fix things, like there's literally nothing he can say. There's no answer that he can give that will give me what I'm actually seeking, which is just to feel better about this and to find a way to move on. So for me, that's how I came to the conclusion, like, no, I should not reach out to this person and keep trying to talk, because I think that I want to ask a bunch of questions, but I really don't actually want to, or actually want to get those answers.
Yeah.
There's also, I think, scenarios where after you've broken up with a person, you look them up, whether that's like through social media or, I hate to say this, but like I checked, like, is my ex still in California, for instance? Found out the answer to that question. And then I was like, I'm going to put that away.
And how great did you feel?
Not very. Not very. I don't even know why I did that. I was just kind of like in a space where I was like, I'm coming up basically now. I have just passed the year anniversary of me breaking up with my ex of 9 years and also leaving California and moving to New York. And so there were a lot of sort of feelings that came up around that anniversary. And it did make me question, like, okay, what's going on here? Like, because he's not on social media at all. So I was interested.
I think it's good for you.
It's extremely good for me.
Yeah.
Extremely good for me. But I did, just type his name into Google and see what got spat back out. And some things got spat back out. So that was interesting. And then I was like, you're done now. Put that away, which was good.
That's good you were able to do that. I feel like sometimes that's harder to actually control yourself and actually stop looking up those things. Again,
for sure.
Seeking an answer that maybe you don't actually need the answer. You just want to somehow feel less uncomfortable than you do right now.
Totally.
Yeah.
Even if you're not trying to reach out to your ex, or you're not trying to creep on your ex's online presence, our brains can still fall into this place of just obsessively reviewing every detail of the relationship, all of the relationship history. I did this with that same big breakup a few years ago, where I just like went through all of my journals obsessively, like everything I'd ever written about this person for no good reason. Like there's this part of me that's just like, oh my God, I just want to understand. I just want to understand. I just want to understand. But like there was no new understanding to be found. And again, it's not like it's bad to seek answers or understanding, but truly it just was coming from a place of like, I'm just trying to feel better. I'm just trying to be able to move on from this. But on the flip side, we can do the opposite, I think, that we can laser focus on getting to the other side of it, on getting to processing and acceptance and moving on. And we can barrel right past any analysis, getting answers or understanding or insight from it. So can the two of you think of situations where you've seen that?
I mean, yeah, I think anytime we talk about de-escalation, and actually we have an episode coming up in a few weeks about de-escalation. So if you're interested in that, be sure you're subscribed to the show so you can get that when it comes out. But something that I noticed came up a lot when I was researching that episode was this idea that I want to be a good poly person, or I want to be a good, really evolved relationship person. And so every breakup, like we've got to stay close friends. We've got to stay in each other's lives somehow. We have to have this no drama de-escalation, but that's like the minimum de-escalation possible. And that we can sometimes like forget that we also need to process and grieve, and that maybe there isn't still a friendship there to be had, that we can sometimes maybe like overvalue quote healthy de-escalation for its own sake rather than for how it actually serves you and serves the other person.
Totally.
I just sort of went through that recently, and I am instead of trying to stay friends with this person, which I tried for quite a while, and that was circumstantial as well. I was working with them. But I have said now, like, hey, let's actually take some time apart and not talk for a number of months. And I think it's been really healthy and helpful for both of us, I'm hoping. So I do think that it's extremely important to be able to give yourself that time and not just rush immediately into this idea of we have to be buds again. because that's not always the most healthy way in which to process.
I think I've also seen people really blaze past any of the getting answers, getting insight, getting understanding, and they will dive straight into self-blame. You know, I've seen like I know we talked earlier about some people who take like zero responsibility for a relationship ending, and it's just I know who the bad guy is and it's not me and that's all I need in order to move on. And people can swing the complete opposite as well, where they can take on all the responsibility for a relationship ending rather than examining all of the contributing factors. Often if somebody's doing this, chances are high that this is a repeating pattern for them and for their brain to go somewhere like, oh my God, like, of course I ruined another relationship. I always ruin my relationships. I just wasn't evolved enough to be non-monogamous, or I wasn't skilled enough to be monogamous, you know, and there's something about just diving straight into this pit of self-blame that weirdly, even though it's miserable, it can feel like, okay, well, I've already got the answers. I know the answers that I'm the bad guy. Great. I don't need to spend any more time with that. I can just work on accepting the fact that I'm the bad guy and then moving on with my life.
Yeah, and maybe not getting some answers that would be helpful to actually introspect and understand what did happen. What might I learn about the partners that I choose, or how I expect other people to engage with me in relationships. Maybe the problem is actually at a different point. So yeah,
Totally.
that's a great point. I think another variation on that is the rebound.
I feel called out.
Right? Is just going straight into another relationship as a way of being like, oh well, the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else, or whatever that saying is, right? Of like, and you know, maybe there's some truth to that sometimes, but often it's like, no, we're just trying to skip ahead to acceptance by moving on to something else, and instead we're sort of increasing our emotional processing debt that we haven't paid yet, or something like that.
Interesting.
And can I just say from experience, and, you know, not only did I like jump immediately into a new relationship and then also moved across the country and made a bunch of major life changes, but I also think that a lot of the unhealthy patterns that you may have had from a past relationship will creep into that new relationship immediately without giving yourself the opportunity to really examine them and be like, hey, is that something that I want to be doing again? Is that the kind of thing that I want in my life again? Is that the way in which I want to conduct myself in relationships, period? And often you'll find, actually, I'm only doing those things because they feel really safe and they feel really normal, but not necessarily because I actually want them.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally. So this is what I mean where I'm saying I'm not trying to place, you know, one type of closure as being better than or healthier than the other. I do think in certain situations we need some of both. But so that's why after the break, first I'm going to be diving into what the science says about this seeking answers behavior. We're going to dive into the need for closure scale, and I'm going to force my co-host to take a quiz about that to evaluate themselves.
Oh, dear.
And then after that, we're going to dive into the other city of processing and acceptance.
Awesome. So before we go on, we're going to take a quick break to talk about some sponsors of this show. We really appreciate our sponsors for being willing to help support this show and keep it going. So if you could support us by just taking a moment to listen, and if any of them seem interesting to you, use our promo codes, use our links. That does directly help support the funding of this show. And of course, if you would rather listen without ads and want to be part of our exclusive community, you can go to multiamory.com/join and become one of our subscribers there.
All right, so let's talk about this first city, about seeking answers and seeking understanding. So in 1993, Ari Kruglansky, I think that's my best attempt at that, Donna Webster and Adana Clem created the need for closure scale, the NFCS.
Scales for everything.
Oh, yeah.
The need for
Scales upon
drama
scales.
scale, the need for closure scale. I love it.
I don't know. The NFCS, though, makes me think it's some sort of crime drama
NFCS Los Angeles.
procedural.
Yeah. Miami.
NFCS Los Angeles would be like helping people stalk their ex.
Oh, dear.
Like,
Oh,
no,
dear.
they're like be helping them get those answers to like, oh my God, does he still live in California? Oh, has he moved on? Is he starting to date somebody new? What kind of job does he have now? Like that would be this like very unhealthy, but I think also very funny show.
Exactly.
Anyway, so the NFCS was created to make it a standard way to measure people's need for closure. So it was originally a 42-item scale. In 2007, there was a shorter version of the test that was created that's very close to being accurate to the 42-item scale, but only has 15 questions. Some examples from this scale include things like, I dislike questions which could be answered in many different ways. I hate to change my plans at the last minute. I feel irritated when one person disagrees with what everyone else in a group believes. I don't like to be with people who are capable of unexpected actions, and so on and so forth. What you'll find is interesting is that very few of these statements have to do with something like a romantic relationship or about
that did
closure
jump out to me right
directly.
away.
Yes, yeah. Let's all take it.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
Yes,
Oh, dear.
here's a link.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so let's see. Jase's score is 47. Emily's score is 55, which puts you both in the healthy mid-range.
Great.
A score up to 30 means low need for closure. Scores between 75 and 90 means high need for closure. I was a high need for closure person.
Really?
This is what
That's
I predicted.
fascinating.
This
Really?
was what I predicted.
Then
yes,
both of
about
us
how-
would be middle and that you would
I-
be high.
I operated on a binary in my mind where I
course.
assumed
Just low or high, I see.
that the two of you would be low and that I would be high. Okay, I have to start it with a caveat as far as interpreting these results that nothing is set in stone, none of this is a death sentence, but researchers have found that certain tendencies will arise depending on where people fall on this scale. So having too high of a need for closure can cause particular bias to show up in your pursuit of answers and understanding specifically. So for example, that might mean something like sselecting only evidence that supports the first answer that you come up with. It
sure.
could mean getting stuck in one way of thinking in spite of new information, deciding not to check the reliability of a source, right? So this idea of like, okay, I found something that confirms and gives me a clear answer, and so I don't really care about checking to see whether or not it's reliable.
And that means a higher need for closure?
A higher need for closure, yes. Now, this is
Interesting.
a fun one, too, that according to the researchers, people who are high in their need for closure, quote, tend to prefer an autocratic leadership and hierarchical group decision structure while derogating group members with deviant opinions. High levels of a need for closure has also been linked to things like racism, sexism, belief in conspiracy theories, among others.
Whoa.
In other
Whoa.
words, I guess I suck.
No.
So,
Jeez. Okay,
No.
now let's
No, but
back up
I-
a sec here.
I will say though, Dedeker, like listening to you talk about, I don't think you used the word obsessively, but that you went through your journals, for instance, to try to find what was going on there, why this thing occurred. I mean, that's kind of behavior that is a little different from my own, for example, when I'm looking at closure. Like mine is usually, yes, stalking their
social
Instagram or
media,
looking them
yeah.
up on Google. But, but going back, that's more, I think the distinction there is that what I'm doing is a little bit more external. What you're doing is a little bit more internal. Like looking back at like, what were my feelings surrounding the relationship and could I have guessed somehow before that this happened? Mine's just like, what's that bastard doing now? It's a little different.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, a couple things that are surprising me about it is that, I mean, I guess it makes sense that I'm in the middle ground. I feel like for me, it's more the third one we talked about earlier, which is like the replaying it in your head, trying to like figure out what were the patterns there? What were the things I missed? What were the clues I missed? Or what did I do? What did they do? Like that kind of stuff. But I'm surprised, Dedeker, because I feel like you're the one who, like, if you're going to buy a chocolate bar, you'll look up like 5 different review sites, like
Because I need the answers.
top chocolate bar of the 2025. Like you're so much more likely to do that rather than just going with your first answer and like only looking for things that support that.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, because the way that I would interpret it is that I need closure with this chocolate bar to know that it is the right one to buy. Maybe I'm less comfortable with it being ambiguous. I don't know if this is the best chocolate bar to buy. It's okay to just take it and then let it be mysterious.
Wow.
So I think it still comes from the high need for closure. But we can throw people with a low need for closure under the bus also. On the positive side, people on the lower end of the scale may have an easier time understanding and accepting complicated situations, right? So I think, like you were talking about, Emily, that sometimes when a breakup happens, it's messy. It's not always clear that, oh yeah, there was one asshole, right? Or there was one bad guy, or maybe this has been many, many years in the making and it's really hard to untangle. And if you have a low need for closure, you may not feel that same impulse to like really comb through and create a narrative and figure out how did this happen. Like you may just understand, wow, there's just a lot of complicated factors. Also, low need for closure people may have an easier time making decisions even when faced with ambiguous information. So, right, Jase, that's what I'm saying with the chocolate bars is maybe it's
Yeah, I
ambiguous
see.
which one is the best to buy, but they can still make a decision regardless, even when that's ambiguous. Talking about chocolate bars makes it sound so silly, but
If we're looking for, you want to get a new frying pan or something, where I feel like your impulse is to look at a lot of different review sites, read a lot of information about it to really try to make the right decision, versus I might look at one or two review sites and be like, yeah, this feels pretty good. I guess I'll go with that one.
that's interesting. Okay, but here's the question. I don't know if we can apply closure to something like buying something.
Sure, yeah, that's maybe
necessarily.
different.
Yeah.
Just as a quick thing about that, I did recently get exposed to this idea of essentially like a searchable good and a non-searchable good.
Oh,
Interesting.
that.
What's the difference there?
Essentially, the context it came up in was talking about dating and how using app-based dating can lead you to pursue dating relationships like you would pursue a purchase of a good.
Oh, that makes so much
Thinking
sense.
thinking like, oh well, I've got to find the one that has the right parameters and comes in the right color and
I can
comes,
see all the
has these
options.
features. I can compare options and find the one that's the right one for me. Versus something that's an experiential good, or good is a weird way to say it, but like an experiential choice is that it's about how do I feel when I'm with this person. And that's not something that you can just put in the right search parameters to uncover. You're making a good point, though, when thinking about closure and these sorts of things of, do we feel different about that if it's a searchable good versus something that's experiential?
Yeah,
Well-
that's interesting.
And we didn't even talk about this, but again, I'm going to say this because these are two different scenarios that you and I were in, Dedeker, that I was the one who did the breaking up in my last relationship and you were the one who was
Yes.
broken up with.
Yes.
And I also do wonder, I have seen, for instance, both of the last exes that I left them, when that happened. And both of them, I feel like, floundered for longer than I did. And I don't know, that's not clearly always the case, but I think in both of those scenarios there was a lot more anger / hurt / reaching out that I was sort of ready to walk away from that, whereas they were the ones doing much more of that. And I do wonder if that tendency is more there for those answers when you are the one who has been left.
Yeah, I think you're onto something because if you think about it, if you're the person who is the dumper,
You're
usually that
kind of at the closure point.
Exactly. Like usually it means you've already done your seeking answers
Yeah.
phase,
Yeah.
right? You've already done your seeking understanding phase, and then you have come to the conclusion, I got to get out of here. This is not working.
Yeah.
Right?
So depending
And-
how you measure that, Emily, you could say that for you, your closure took several years for you to get to that decision.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
different way to
Several
look at
years
it.
and several failed attempts at trying to make
Right.
it better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to come back to the scale, having too low of a need for closure could also be a problem, that you could have difficulty making decisions at all, or you could just truly have an inability to move on. Like you're so unmotivated by needing closure that you don't even get to that phase of moving on. Or it means that this could
so
be
it's
a
not
sign
like
of
you get closure for free. It's just you
Yes.
feel less compelled to find
yes,
it. Interesting.
exactly,
I hadn't put that
exactly.
together.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Or it could mean you're actively avoiding getting answers, getting clarity, getting certainty in that regard.
Interesting.
Now, here's the other fascinating thing is that our individual need for closure isn't always fixed, according to the research. When we feel comfortable and safe, our level of need for closure goes down. We're a little more comfortable with if something's ambiguous, for instance. When we feel threatened, our need for closure increases. So if we're inundated with fatigue, stress, a noisy environment, information overload, or feeling pressure to give an opinion or pressure to make a decision, our need for closure increases. Which honestly, I feel like spending any time online is all of these things, like
Gosh,
fatiguing,
yeah.
stressful, noisy, information overload, feeling this pressure to weigh in on something. And so that increases our need to I need to find the right answer in this very complicated, potentially global situation. And there's also research that suggests that during crisis and turmoil, general need for closure levels go up among people. And that can lead people to make worse decisions out of a desire to get concrete answers quickly. And I think we can look at the past 5 years and 100% see that playing out.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. When you mention that our need is not always fixed, I also feel like my answers to this before getting treated for depression and after would be very different too. Even just like seeing some of that behavior in myself and how I would have answered some of those questions. I'm like, yeah, I can't say for sure because it's been a while now. It's been a year or so, but I feel like I would have answered them very differently. And so again, like another circumstantial hormonal change that could be going on.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I also found this study that took the need for closure scale and I would say enhanced it. They had a different way of clarifying it and breaking it down into 2 distinct parts. So specifically, this information comes from an Argentinian study, 2022, led by Jaume et al., titled Factor Structure and Internal Consistency on a Reduced Version of the Revised Test of Need for Cognitive Closure. This was published in Frontiers in Psychology. And long story short, they split the scale into evaluating people's urgency tendency versus their permanence tendency. And I think this is really fascinating. So urgency tendency, this refers to our desire to resolve ambiguity quickly, prioritizing speed over accuracy in our decision making.
Like we were talking about online in stressful situations.
Yes.
Information overload.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that could be something to bring it actually back to retail, like impulse purchasing. Like I don't want to sit and like do all this research. All I know is like I need this frying pan and so I'm just going to buy the first one that I see that seems okay.
The one that Instagram feeds me.
Right.
That's why the sense of urgency thing in advertising's been a thing for so long.
Yes.
Or that's why, if you go to one of those talks about buying a timeshare or whatever, there's always this sense of this is only available right now. You've got to make a decision soon because this price is only for now. Like all those tactics come from manipulating this. That's wild. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Or things like, just endorsing the first idea that was floated in a group because you want to avoid having to do like lengthy debate or having action to be deferred. Honestly, I know I fall into this camp sometimes. I think in the meetings that the three of us have that sometimes I can get frustrated with like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, let's just choose a thing and let's go,
sure.
right? Like, let's just go because I don't want to keep talking about it or whatever. But I want to bring this into the realm of relationships, that this urgency tendency that we're talking about, like, can the two of you think of scenarios where you see this play out specifically in the field of relationships?
Yeah, just why somebody did anything in particular, whether it's like, why did we break up? Why did you sleep with that person? Why did you act like that in front of my friends? Whatever the heck, like, why are they ghosting me? Is it because there's somebody else and that they care about, or they suddenly like found me not as attractive or interesting anymore? Just all of these things of demanding like these immediate answers from somebody. When in reality, I think sometimes like things can happen where you don't necessarily even know the answer. You're just like, well, I did a thing. I did an impulse purchase on my life. And so here I am.
Yeah. The thing that came to mind for me is if you're in that narrative of I have to be a good, mature poly person or just I'm an experienced person with relationships who knows what I'm doing.
Yeah.
There can be that pressure, that urgency of like, I need to get this figured out and resolved quickly because I need to show that I can move on from this or that I am not still upset by this or something. I could see that pressure coming maybe from your social group or maybe from the online groups that you're in. And then I can see that being related to things like jumping really quickly to accusations or putting some kind of label, like finding some particular thing that could possibly be labeled as toxic. And therefore, that ex was toxic. They're abusive then, and they're harmful. They're a bad person. Okay, good. I've got my resolution. I can only look for things that support that, and I don't have to question it because it's lets you get to an answer quickly, I guess.
Yeah, so this tendency to immediately create an oversimplified narrative about what happened.
Yeah.
And I know with this particular breakup that happened, for sure, as soon as I could land on like, oh, he was selfish, like that was the problem. He was really selfish. And then it was almost like a mantra, just like on repeat in my mind, because I was just in so much distress. But that was something like that felt like I've created a concrete answer. Great. And I can cling on to that. Even though now, like a few years out, I can look back and evaluate and be like, yeah, sure, maybe he was selfish in some regards, but I can also see many more of all the contributing factors that went into the end of that relationship. But at the time, because I was in just like so much pain and I'm this high need for closure person, it makes sense why my brain would have done that.
Interesting. Yeah. That makes sense.
So that's what the urgency tendency looks like. And then the permanence tendency, which I think this is interesting. This involves this need to maintain this particular answer that's given you closure indefinitely and resisting contradictory information. Now, the way that researchers say this looks involves things like having a sustained belief in conspiracy theories, for instance, clinging to a rigid belief in a particular political ideology or a particular candidate, regardless of the candidate's behavior or scandals.
Wouldn't know anything about that.
I don't think
right
anyone
now.
knows anybody that's really hard to relate to right now. Or even something more benign, like having resistance to new systems or software being implemented at your work or a new way of doing things.
Jase is like,
Jase is just fuming.
That's shown up in basically every job that I've had for the last while is this struggle of change management, of like helping people feel like it's okay to change or to try something new. And I struggle with it with Multiamory when I want us to use some new task tracking
I
thing.
think Emily and I have some more permanence
Yes.
tendencies
Right.
regarding
just
that.
like, but why can't we just stay with this one? That
Why
we've
can't we just
gotten
have
semi-good
closure?
at?
Gotten closure
Please.
with this this imperfect software that we're using.
Yeah.
Right. And then at the VFX studio, same problem of like getting people to see the way we're doing this is painful. There could be a better way. Same now. That's a lot of, working with people on that. Wow, that's fascinating. I'm actually a little curious about this though. Dedeker, in this research, this permanence tendency, is this more about that I need to really thoroughly figure out the right answers so it can be permanent? Or is it more about I just can't have a decision I've made or a closure I've found be challenged?
I mean, to use myself as an example, where I shared how I, for quite a while really clung onto this, like, oh, he was selfish. That's what it was. He was selfish. And I think that it might be even a few years out, even if maybe I've worked with a therapist, maybe I've spent all this time looking through my journals, and I can see that there's evidence to the contrary, that my ex-partner was just this selfish, bad person. But if I'm still maybe over-relying on, no, but that was the answer, he was selfish, right? Or, people do this with things like, oh yeah, my partner, they never loved me. That's what it was. They never really loved me.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Yeah.
When maybe there's probably actually a lot of evidence to the contrary. And it's like there's a discomfort in having to change that if you feel like the way that you were able to get closure from that relationship was to land there. That like, oh, they never loved me. That's why. That's what the problem was.
Gosh, so something this is making me think of, one is when people make some really big declarative statement after a breakup, like, oh, well, this is why I can never date cis men again, or this is why...
I did that one too after that breakup.
No more dudes. We're done.
Which, that was not permanent, because I'm still dating dudes. Still dating cis dudes.
Whoops.
So...
Yeah.
But that also reminds me of something else that I just recently was introduced to. I was listening to this dating coach talking, and she was saying that something she's just noticed in the last year or so, relatively recently, is people saying, oh, I've quit dating. And that she's like, before that, people would say something like, I'm taking some time for myself right now, or I'm working on my career right now, or I'm working on my friendships. But it's become more of this identity of I've quit dating. Like I am a person who has quit dating. And that to me seems like it fits this, that maybe that's been driven by this permanence tendency, or maybe the urgency tendency, I'm not sure which. And maybe that could be encouraged by just the loudness and stressfulness of online information coming at us so much more
and
quickly.
online dating in general.
And online dating,
Right.
yeah. Where
And
it's
I
like
think
I've got to make
the
these
speed
big...
at which you could be like going on so many dates with people and getting rejected and having all these questions and having an escalation and getting your hopes up and then it doesn't work out. Like I think that could very easily dump somebody, like increase their need for closure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So I think if I was going to draw any conclusions from this research, it's that it is important to find this type of closure, this seeking answers, seeking the lessons, finding a helpful narrative after a relationship ends. But trying to get there too quickly can have consequences, right? Like, I think trying to really cling on to the first answer that crosses your path, essentially, can...
Yeah, it'll make you rush to get an answer, and then also you feel like you have to stick to it. And so then
Yes.
you'll... Yeah, that's really
Yes.
interesting.
Yes.
I do understand wanting to feel better immediately or try to
sure.
stave off the pain that is just very constant or feeling very unpredictable. I will say, like, even though I was the one who broke up with my last two partners, I am kind of shocked at the amount of times when out of nowhere I would just like feel really shitty or feel really sad. And I think it does make sense to want to like look at these things and find the reason why something happened so that you can have that as an emotional touchstone when you are in a place of distress. But I agree with you that it's important to allow for the prospect of nuance, I guess, because as time goes on, we're able to go back and say, wait a minute, there was more to that story than meets the eye, or there was more to that situation than I first thought. And I think the goal is hopefully to be able to find not just the things that make you feel better, but the things that will give you clarity for your future relationships and hopefully move you into a place where you're more healthy for what's to come in the future.
Yeah. Well, so I think if you're someone who identifies with this, high need for closure, or if you're listening like, ooh, yeah, that sounds like me in my past few breakups or whatever. I know for myself, there was a turning point where I had to let myself just sit in the discomfort of knowing like there are some questions about this relationship I will never know the answer to. Even if I could conjure up my ex and ply him with all these questions, it doesn't mean that the answers would be satisfactory or even that he'd be telling me the full truth, right? I think that's another factor here that like, I see this play out sometimes when people get ghosted or if someone rejects them and then they like want to do like a feedback session essentially or like try to be like, hey, can you tell me why or whatever? And maybe that can be helpful for some people, but also it doesn't mean the person's going to be honest with you, really.
They might not even know the honest answers themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, if this sounds like you, like maybe your area of growth is learning to tolerate more of that ambiguity, right? Or learning to like figuring out what do you tell yourself when something is just going to be a mystery and there's not going to be an answer. Like, how do you integrate that into your story about how this relationship fit into your life?
Yeah, so we need to go on to talk about the other type of acceptance of how do we find...
We're going to get on our donkeys and go over to the other city next door.
Okay, I didn't realize we were doing this trip on donkeys.
It's our
Gosh,
closure
okay.
donkeys.
I didn't realize that this was like way back in the day, before cars or mass transit or automobiles or anything.
No, this is medieval.
Okay,
Got it. Okay.
So
These
while
Medieval
older
walled
towns.
cities. With
While
donkeys.
we're gathering up our wine skins and our hardtack bread and stuff and putting it in the saddlebags on our donkey to travel to the other city, we're going to take another quick break to talk about some sponsors for this show. We really appreciate our sponsors for helping us to bring this information to all of you, and we appreciate you for taking a moment to check them out. If any are interesting to you, use our promo codes or links. Those are in our show description. That helps us out a lot. And then, of course, the best thing you can do is to join directly in our community by going to multiamory.com/join. And we would love to have you be part of that community. And of course, getting things like early releases of ad-free episodes and things like that.
Oh, wow. We've just arrived in the bustling city of processing and acceptance.
Yeah,
Time
let me
look at it
tie our
here.
donkey to the post here.
Yeah,
and
make sure the
some
donkeys
water.
get some water and wash
have a
off our
snack.
feet. And
Yeah.
we can all sit down and have a little snack. So this particular closure city, processing and acceptance. In this context, do we think that, I found myself wondering, is closure really just another term for moving through the grieving process?
Yeah.
Because I think that when we say things like closure, the image that gets conjured in my brain is almost like we've hit the button, we've crossed the gate into the city, and therefore it's done. Like we got closure, it's binary, so now we can move on.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be really nice, but that's not how it works, right? And so I guess I'm wondering about that this type of closure seems like it's referring more to a longer term process.
Yeah, for sure, because we know that grief and the stages of grief are not necessarily linear. So I do think that it's important to understand that you may have moments of acceptance, and then you may go back into moments of anger, moments of hurt, betrayal, trying to figure out what the heck is going on, or just even having like an emotional breakdown, which I was shocked happened to me like even 6 months after my breakup happened. Just like, why am I crying? Why can't I talk about this? Why do I have to basically sit with myself for a while and just be sad and can't really do anything other than that? We all talked about this in my breakup episode, my specific one, 479, Grief Breakups and Hope for What Comes Next, where we were going through the nonlinear stages of grief. And then, also talking about the fact that your own healing needs to be something that is proactive as opposed to avoiding or numbing or distracting. A colleague of mine recently went through a breakup, and I saw her just going out every single night to get really, really, really drunk. And that was clearly her way of coping. But then she would come in the next day and be just completely annihilated and feeling awful and terrible. And to me, that is just a huge amount of numbing, but not really fixing the problem. So I sent her actually your episode, Dedeker, on when you had your big breakup that you've been referring to for this episode, because I went back and read that transcript over before I sent it to her, and I was like, damn, there's some really wonderful words of wisdom in here. So if you go back and listen to episode 365, Heartbreak and Recovery, that's the episode where Dedeker talks about her breakup. That was probably your last, like, very big breakup of a relationship that had been many, many years, and the challenges that you went through there, but also the science behind heartbreak and recovery, and a lot of the things that you did to help yourself feel better through that.
Yeah, talking about that, going out on a bender to get through grief over a breakup, whether it's a substance bender or it doesn't have to be substance related necessarily. It could be, like just any of the things we turn to numb ourselves out. And that's so interesting. To me, it feels distinctly American to want to just hit the fast forward button through grief. And I think that's why these adages about, best way to get over someone is to get under somebody. And the way that we can egg each other on, encourage each other, like, yes, fine, come out, let's get you drunk, right? Or let me hook you up with this person that I know or whatever, that we are uncomfortable not only with grief, but we're also uncomfortable with slow grief, I suppose.
Right. It's also why we jump on to thinking we're supporting our friend or our family member by, let's all pile on and talk about what a piece of shit this person was who you used to be with. Regardless of who broke up with whom, it's like, let's pile on them so that you can move on and feel your closure and whatever. It's like, let's take the nuance away.
Funny that, at least from what I could find, there isn't like a need to grieve scale out there. It's not like we fall, as human beings, we fall into this category of, this person really doesn't have to go through a grieving process and this person really does. It's like, no, like we do have to go through a processing and acceptance chapter as we're getting closure, right? It's like we really can't avoid that, even though I'm sure many of us would like to.
Yeah. I do think it's worth acknowledging that there's a balance to be struck, though. And this was something that I actually found really helpful when my therapist was talking to me about this like a year ago or so, where, we were talking about not using things to just numb, right? Like drinking or something like that. And she was like, yes, that's good to not do that and to, process your feelings and not rely on that. She's like, but if you do sometimes, that's also okay. You haven't failed because you've done that. It's like sometimes we do need to find ways to, ironically, or maybe not ironically, to kind of slow ourselves down a little bit. So instead of diving into this like deep end of processing, thinking, I'll just white knuckle through all this bad feeling and then I'll be fine. It's like, no, you can maybe distract yourself, play some games, hang out with friends, drink a little, something like that. But to not go too hard into that side of just avoiding it. Right. I thought that at least for me was helpful, to not feel like it has to be this all uncomfortableness and all suffering, being a just, a Buddhist monk about it who's, never escaping any feelings that are coming up.
So in that heartbreak and recovery episode that I've been referencing, you found through research that 11 weeks tends to be the time at which you sort of turn a corner and begin really the process of like moving on and not maybe constantly thinking about this person or constantly feeling down in the dumps about this person. So that's, almost 3 months, which is a long amount of time, but
especially while you're in it, it feels like forever.
It does feel like forever. But I will say, if you're looking at that against the backdrop of like a 7 or a 9 year relationship, that's actually not that long of an amount of time. I am trying to think back to last year, and yeah, maybe about 3 to 6 months is when I actually started feeling better, when I had less episodes of, wow, I can't freaking get out of bed today because I'm feeling so shitty about this, or I'm trying to do things to numb the pain, or I'm like throwing myself into work so much so that I don't have to think about it. Those kinds of things, that it just became a little bit more easy to move on in a way that it hadn't before that.
Yeah, in my breakup, I do think it was around that 3-month mark where it wasn't like that was when I was completely out of pain, but that was the first time that I noticed, I just went half a day without thinking about the situation.
Yeah.
Like I actually was able to be present. And I remember it was when we were at Disneyland with my family, with my niece and nephew, that was the first, like when I was like, oh my God, like I actually just had like a really wonderful day where I was present with everybody and my mind didn't slip back into thinking about this painful situation. So yeah, I think there's something about that particular time period, but it does still come down to time, which is so hard. And it's like it's the same way as when you're recovering from illness. And again, we live in a culture that loves to just like fill you up with over-the-counter cold meds and get you back to work and just get you allegedly quote unquote healthy as fast as possible. But the same thing here, that like you have to treat yourself like you might if you were sick, and just waiting for an illness to pass, where you try to create everything that you need, right? Like being able to try to take it easy on yourself and to get rest and to get fluids. And I think really just a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like a physical illness, that's something we might take more seriously than an emotional one.
It took me a while, but I went back to therapy after my big breakup and move last year. And I think that was so beneficial. Just the ability to talk to a therapist, somebody who's getting paid to listen to you wax poetic about how awful your ex was. A loved one, anyone. I think that time and space to cry, to complain, to vent without judgment is really, really important, because sometimes just getting it outside of yourself. Also, like Dedeker, you journal a lot, and I've been doing that more as well. I think even in processing like feelings about new relationships, for instance, just being able to get something out of your brain and onto a piece of paper is really, really beneficial for so many reasons, and for having that opportunity to hold time and space for you to grieve and to process.
I don't know if this is bad or not. The two of you can tell me if this is bad, but in my journaling recently, because, okay, here's the deal, is every time I've had to process the end of our relationship, I found it so helpful to go through my journals, like so helpful to get perspective on the past and things like that. And it's to the, like now I have started tagging my journal entries with the names of the people that I write about, so that in the future, should I need to go back and process something, I can more easily find the entries I wrote about a particular person. Is that too type A?
I mean, it's extremely type A, but I would expect nothing less from you, Dedeker. It is just interesting. I don't know. I've tried to not necessarily worry so much about the end of something and just sort of take it one day at a time. And I think that the only problem that I would potentially have with that is that it is kind of somewhere in the back of your brain setting up the possibility that this might end. And I understand
I love thinking about that.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
well,
I love catastrophizing.
I don't like thinking about that. I'm just like, let's pretend that's never going to happen. But I understand where you're coming from, too.
Yeah. Maybe there's a balance to be found.
Yes.
I would also hope that maybe these tags in Dedeker's journal could also be used when you want to look up all the great things.
I do. Exactly.
You wrote about me.
Jase, you have a special tag, right? That's specifically not just tagging you, but also tagging like good things for my stash, right? For when I want a little reminder of
that's sweet.
The good parts and, the wonderful things you said to me.
You need to remember that I was good once.
So I don't just use it for evil, I promise. I promise.
That's good.
To talk about this particular flavor of closure, I really liked what Dr. Alexandra Solomon had to say. She runs the Reimagining Love podcast. She calls this the pain to pang transition. And she really reiterates that closure doesn't mean a total absence of pain. And closure doesn't mean that you finally feel positive about your ex, or even that you finally feel neutral about your ex or about the relationship. And I really liked this quote. She says, "You're moving toward closure when the edges of your grief become a bit less jagged, when there are longer stretches of calm between your bouts of deep emotion, and when you are looking more through the windshield than in the rearview mirror." And I think this really sums up this particular flavor city of closure, this processing
Flavor
and
of this
acceptance.
city. Flavor
This
Town.
idea.
Did we go to Flavor Town just now?
Oh no, Jase. I guess we did.
Unfortunately.
But yeah, this idea that we're not necessarily aiming for everything just feels good again. Or when I think about this relationship, I feel nothing but positivity and gratitude and perspective and things like that. But it's that there's a pang, but it's different from being an active pain.
I like that. And I like that with both of these, it's kind of about looking at how you have some power to help find healthy closure for yourself. You know, how to not hold on too firm to the answers that you first assumed, like realizing there's some space for ambiguity there and that you don't need to rush to come to a conclusion. And then also that the grieving process takes some time and it's not something that you need that ex to do for you. I think that's a key
like
part here.
don't make your ex the king or queen of closure town, right? Or maybe your ex is not the donkey. Don't ride your ex into closure town.
Oh, wow.
Just the closure, it's in your hands. It's not in your ex's.
Indeed.
And on that note, we want to hear from you folks. When have you struggled with closure? That's going to be the question that's on our Instagram stories. So go check out our Instagram stories at multiamory_podcast and answer the question, when have you struggled with closure? And we will repost your answers. Also, the best place to share your thoughts about this episode with other listeners is in our episode discussion channel in our Discord server, or you can post about it in our private Facebook group. You can get access to these groups and join our community by going to multiamory.com/join. In addition, you can share with us publicly on Instagram at multiamory_podcast. Multiamory is created and produced by Jase Lindgren, Emily Matlack, and me, Dedeker Winston. Our production assistants are Rachel Shenowork and Carson Collins. Our theme song is Forms I Know I Did by Josh and Anand from the Fractal Cave EP. The full transcript is available on this episode's page on multiamory.com.